go from there. An explosive start, certainly, to the first of 2 episodes we're going to be featuring tonight on a Media Matters Midweek Drive meets Resonance Rewind, in which we have the focus very solidly on our extra special Midweek Drive out, of course, Jean Bruce Scott. Welcome back, Jean. How are you?
I'm great, Alex. So good to see you. Good to see you, Robin. Jackie here. And Paul.
Exactly.
Yeah, hi.
Paul Powers
Jean,
and
how you
Robin
doing?
Peirce with us. And a newbie, of course, the soul who actually, Jean, you're directly responsible for, because she is the host online of the super duper Jean Bruce Scott is Awesome site. I know it's called something different. It's Jackie Rennick. How are you, Jackie?
Thank you. It's lovely to be here.
Marvelous. So we'll talk more about obviously the site and lots of other sort of great JBS activities and so on. But Jean, if it's okay, we're launching with Magnum. As you can see, Paul Powers is wearing a specific Magnum-oriented Hawaiian shirt specifically for the whole experience. We'll be joined possibly by 1 or 2 other folk as well. Robin was particularly impressed, I think, with this special episode. Of course, you don't actually feature your character Maggie Poole until part 2, but I have to say, what a tough call it actually happens to be for Mac, who obviously gets blown up in a car in the first episode of this, and then he has another car incident in Airwolf, which is something else we'll be considering. So quite bizarre, really. Still, it's one way of getting more airtime for Maggie Poole. That's what I say. Very critical. Robin, a brief summation of did you see the sunrise, please?
Well, this opened up season 3. Now, up to this point, as I recall, Magnum had been a pretty easygoing sort of action adventure, a little bit light. And then season 3 opened with a 2-parter. And it wasn't a series that normally did 2-parters, as far as I can recall. And this one hit like a slap across the face. Not only did it take in Magnum's time as a POW in Vietnam and some of the horrendous things that happened to him at the hands not only of the Viet Cong, but of a certain sadistic Russian. But it seems that this
He was Bulgarian, Robin. He was Bulgarian, not Russian.
That was the cover, though, wasn't it, at the end?
That was the cover.
Yeah. Pay attention, man. And of course, Magnum doesn't believe his friend's assertion that this guy is back, and it becomes very, very serious. And I think that what affected me most was the fact that you had some light action. You know, Magnum had a guy from the past, and he was going to feed him burgers, and they were having a good time watching Starburst 17. And, the guy joined him on a date and he gets killed. And even the Magnum Ferrari gets totaled. And this was as big a thing as totaling the Batmobile. It was just one of the signature things. Then Magnum has to sort out what's happening, but he seems to be more reactive than proactive. I don't know if we're going to give away the ending of this at the moment, but as I've already said... Hold on. What I said earlier before we went on the air was the ending was so much like a 70s action movie of something dramatic happening and freeze frame. And it was so different from anything that we've ever seen on that show before. And I'll say this on air and say this to Jean directly. I hadn't seen Magnum since its first run, and I saw a handful of maybe the first couple of seasons. So I got this on streaming. By the end of that first episode, before you'd even set foot on screen, I had an order into a certain online retailer that operates on a South American river to deliver me the whole box set of about 44 episodes. And that is your fault, partly, Jean Bruce Scott.
I'll send you a check.
That's not the way the acting profession works. Actors do not pay the customers to actually watch this.
No. Don't tell her that. Don't tell her that.
But I love Robin, and I don't want him to be out of pocket.
You see, ever the same. That's the clear line. Paul.
Now Jean Bruce Scott has just said on air that she loves me. I will waiver the check.
Okay. Paul, from your own capacity as an academic, as somebody who's actually too young to remember, I suppose, Magnum PI first time round, this is the first time you'd experienced the episode, directed, of course, by Ray Austin, great British director, responsible for Randall and Hopkirk Deceased, with, of course, Annette Andre, The Champions, we looked at it earlier, a whole range of other factors too. Paul, what did you make of Did You See the Sunrise?
Well, yeah, like I mentioned briefly before we came on air, I was surprised that the show had the voiceover element that you would expect from a private eye noir series. So that was really nice to have that, because the initial tone was very upbeat, happy. I felt like they're in Hawaii, they're on the beach somewhere, and I wasn't sure what to expect. But the more I watched, the plot was complicated, and the characters were deep, and they were all haunted by these events that happened in the past. And then, Gene, when your character, when you came on screen in the second episode, that was like a breath of fresh air. There was the little when the colonel was being like misogynistic.
Gene's first official words on Magnum PR: "Nothing, sir." To which, of course, we have the response from Lance Legault: I bet my birds on it. And it was in Nam. I don't disagree, Colonel, but 2,150,000 Marines, sailors, soldiers, and airmen served in Vietnam between March 1965 and January 1973. And you went off into a whole range of things there, which actually led to the whole thing to Lance Legault's character, of course, Buck Green, saying, "Did you just make that up?" Of course not. It's written in the script, delivered exquisitely. Superb. And indeed, as I say, a shot of yourself, I would say, working through that process and joining the whole Team Magnum family from that point of view. I mean, casting your mind back to that particular time, Gene, was it a case of, well, it's a trip to Hawaii, this is what I did my drama training for?
No, it was much more than that. Oh my gosh. I had been on the soap opera for a couple of years, and I had met Dawn. I didn't audition. I met Dawn on the day that my character on the soap was getting married. And that's a huge thing in soapdom. And so, here I am running around in my wedding dress, and we're breaking for lunch, and I get this call: "Jeannie, can you get over to Universal? Don Bellisario wants to meet you." And so I dashed over there, and of course he kept me waiting a very long time. He's a very busy man, and I'm watching the clock, and I finally said to the secretary, "I've got to leave. I've got to go. I shoot, in 25 minutes. I got to get back in my wedding gown." And so she said, she went in and interrupted him, and I went in and met him, and he had this enormous desk, and the chairs in front of his desk, when you sat down, I don't know if you've ever had this experience before, but you sank down. And so you're looking at the desk, you're looking at this great man and this great desk, and your knees are up there. And so he went through his whole thing and told me how he developed the show and wrote the show and directed the show and all of that stuff. And so when he got to the end of it, he said, "Well, we always like to cast pretty girls, and so I know we're going to find a part for you." And my back just went up, and it was like, and I stood up and I said, "Pretty girl? Don't call me when you need a pretty girl. Call me when you need an actress." And I turned and started to leave the office, and he jumped up from behind his desk. He ran, he beat me to the door, and he said, Jeannie, I've seen your tapes. You're a wonderful actress. You wouldn't be here if you weren't a wonderful actress. I didn't mean to insult you." And of course, I was like, my heart was going 1,000 miles. And I thought, I just lost this gig. I will never work for Don Bellisario. And of course, I got back to the studio. My agents called me. He loved you. He loved you. They're going to put together something. And so then that's where Maggie came from.
And absolutely fantastic. In fact, we should have had a full Maggie Poole series. It's not too late. I don't think it's any surprise that effectively the first episode of the new Jay Hernandez Magnum PI was entitled I Saw the Sunrise. And indeed, there are characters such as Buck Green. There's a definite combination there. I know it's been said that they're not related. This is actually people who are veterans of the Gulf War and the Iraq War and the Iraq conflict, as opposed to the Vietnam War. But I can see a role for Maggie Poole emerging in that one. I think it should happen. It should happen. Let's bring in Jackie Rennick, etc. Janik, yes, elision there, all sorts of words. Jackie, from your own point of view, can you remember what you do when you first saw this episode and what you made of it?
Well, I would only have been 7 or 8 probably when it first showed. So obviously I've caught up since, but I watched Magnum with my parents. And so obviously I've always liked it, but I've been revisiting it recently more and more with working on the page and so forth. And Maggie's just another great character. You can't help but like her.
Very much so. Now, Jackie, share with us, because I detect not an American accent there. Where are you actually based and where do you actually host the whole thing from?
I live in Kent, near Dover, right in the corner of Kent.
So similar to Honolulu. It's untrue. I mean, it could actually be there, either that or the middle of the Nevada desert. Great.
Yes. It's not much fun at the moment. It's windy and wet.
Yeah, but that's our British summer, Jackie. You know this. Yes. It's a done dust deal. Ask Robin in Wales. It's happening. Jessica, meanwhile, in North Carolina. Welcome, Jessica. Have you succeeded in managing to check out Magnum PI as yet, Jessica, for your first official time? Even though it's just 2 weeks, Jean, since Jessica formally graduated from Appalachian State University.
Yes. Congratulations. How wonderful.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, it's very funny seeing like older episodes, because I've never really watched like a full episode of Magnum PI, but my parents watched the older seasons and the new version. And so I've seen like clips of the new version. So it's really funny like going back and seeing the originals, because I forget that this is like the original series and it was from before. So it's very cool. And it's so exciting seeing you there. I can see the picture in Alex's background. It's got Maggie's cool glasses
in the background, as well as of course Maggie Poole, and a lovely put down, I thought, Maggie, from the point of view of the response to just a drink. That's all. Would you like to go for a drink? Who actually told you to ask me that? Says Tom. Just stop it there, basically. He's told it straight away.
Well, she says just a drink, but her eyes are saying something entirely different. No, the thing is that as the characters developed and Maggie, was there more often, she was very much in love with Tom. And so she would have done anything for him. And I think all he needed to do was, bat his baby blues, and there she was. I wanted to go back to something that Robin was saying, and I know are we not giving away the ending? Is that what we're trying not to give away the ending?
Look, at the end of the day, there is a shooting. I shall say no more, basically. And there is a sense that one of the characters actually buys it. But there we are.
Well, back in those days, I will tell you, there were only 3 networks. I don't know if you guys know this, but well, of course, Robin and Alex and Jackie, you know this, but back in those old days, there were 3 networks, and that's all anybody had to watch, right? So what was allowed to be done on those 3 networks was also censored. And so there were a number of things, particularly in that episode, that had not been on air before. So that ending was one of them. What Ivan calls TC.
Yes, the N word. It's not appropriate, and we cannot use it now. But it is not appropriate. It is quite shocking.
It was quite shocking then as well. So there were a number of things that were groundbreaking at the time. The 2-parter. We actually did 2 2-parters. We did that one, and then I did the only other one, which was resolutions and unfinished business. And
this is true. Yeah.
Yeah. So we did 2 that could be made into 2-hour movies that would then show in European markets. But anyway, so that was really groundbreaking, and that was Dawn. And then the same thing with bringing in Sweet Britches and Caitlin. That whole character having a woman police officer flying the helicopter, being out there on her own, that wasn't happening a whole lot in the 80s. And then for Caitlin to eventually fly Airwolf and take her into combat, that's something that's discussed constantly by the guys who follow the show, because it was a big fight whether or not Kate would ever actually fire and kill people with the helicopter. And so I just wanted to credit Dawn with, again, groundbreaking material for the time. It's not like, now we have HBO and Netflix and everybody's got their own original series and you can do anything on them. Have you seen The Americans?
Well, they're just so crazy. It's just unbelievable. But I mean, we tell you that I loved some of the kind of the action sequences as well, and some of the dialogue. Certainly when we have the Vietnam sequence and we have the character of Ivan and the line, he shot him in the femoral artery. Plug it with your finger. How can you do that? How, plugging it with your finger when you've been shot in the femoral artery? I mean, it was tough. Lots of homages, of course, to Stalag 17 with, of course, another great William Holden, not only in the kind of meta-narrative that we see within the episode, but also in the name Cookie, which occurs in both instances from that point of view. And, of course, the Mancunian candidate and Manchurian candidate and all of the other sort of elements that work into that deep-lying, deep-rooted enemies of the state and so on and so forth. Jessica, is this a case of looking back in history, do you think, oh, how quaint? Or was it a case of ultimately everybody loves Zeus and Apollo? I mean, you haven't mentioned Zeus and Apollo, Maggie. Surely Magnum's favorites on the dogs. Zeus, Apollo, and of course, John Hillerman as Higgins.
Throwing the meat out, it's like, oh my gosh. Yeah, that was great.
Let's just quickly go back to Jessica. Favorite characters in this particular aspect of Magnum PI, of course. Did you see the sunrise?
I think PC, I don't know the characters very well, but I think he's just like a sweetheart. And I think that the tie-in with, the Vietnam War kind of shows like, I don't know, I think it's interesting how they're in like paradise, but then they bring in like this aspect of, strife and grief, and it kind of shows like a deeper side of characters. Even though I haven't seen much, I think it's interesting just kind of seeing like how multifaceted they are. So I think TC.
Yeah, Thomas Calvin, of course, a great character with his island hopper tours. And of course, the moral of the story is never actually take some chewing gum from one of your former war comrades. It's going to end in tears and you'll start saying very strange things, maybe even in Dover as well. Paul, what about yourself and characters in terms of did you see the sunrise?
Well, they were all great characters, and I identified the two main characters with the struggle with Vietnam with some of the characters from Predator, and then when they had the Vietnam flashback and they were in the cages, in the wooden cages, I thought that was fascinating. I didn't expect to see anything like that in Magnum PI, but the thing that really made me chuckle was when Magnum went to go see Higgins before the helicopter landed, Higgins offered him some scones or some scones.
Scones.
And and I thought, how quintessentially British is that? Like they had to do that.
Yeah. Scones and jam and scones.
Yeah.
It's wonderful. Even in Wales, they're pushed to actually have scones. Leeks, of course, another line entirely.
We have scones. I had scones a couple of months ago.
There you go. Exactly. So your favorite characters, Robin, apart of course from Maggie Poole, who inevitably is our number one character. That goes without saying in Magnum PI.
Oh, absolutely. First of all, I'd like to address the thing of censorship, and it comes into something I want to say. I watched the episode, and I thought that the whole brainwashing plot was done so well that we don't realize that a certain lead support character is under an influence until it's too late, which actually kind of makes us feel a little bit complicit. And I thought that was so well done. In fact, I watched both episodes twice in the same day because the second time I was looking out for signs. They were all there, but they were so subtly done. And like Paul, I was surprised to see people like in those little cages, and not only the guy getting shot in the femoral artery, but the actual blood being shown to spurt out. I think that the character that for me worked best, and I'm sorry, I do this controversy thing, I can't help myself. I thought Ivan was particularly well realized, and even his use of certain words that we wouldn't use today. Okay, the fact that they could be used back then doesn't excuse the fact, but the fact that that villain used them within the context of being a villain showed his utter contempt for everybody. And I thought that worked well. It's a hugely offensive word. We all know that. But the fact that he used it made him even more evil and despicable. And Bo Svensson did a marvelous job there,
I thought he was brilliant. He was just absolutely brilliant. And you're absolutely right. The way that Don wrote him, and then the way that the character was realized. And if you go ahead and buy all of the seasons,
there are only 8 seasons, Robin.
If you buy all of the seasons, you'll realize that Bo Svensson's Ivan was the only worthy opponent ever for Thomas, and that's why you had to have the ending that you had.
Although arguably, Jean, Buck Green was a bit of an opponent in his own way, really.
Well, Buck was a paper tiger, you know. Thomas got around him with Mac. He got around him with Maggie. If computers had been a little bit further advanced, he would have figured out some computer guy to get around him by computers. So he wasn't. He was an opponent, but he wasn't a worthy opponent. He wasn't. We weren't really going to see that fight.
He wasn't the Moriarty, perhaps, character that we're looking for in terms of that. But still, in terms of Team Magnum, it was nice to see early computers and, of course, the skills that you actually provided with respect to early computers within that whole field. I think that's a family shot that we've actually got there of obviously Larry Manetti, of course, as Rick and Lance and Tom Selleck and the rest of the team in full force there. Okay, we are going to have a brief musical break with I Can't Get No Satisfaction, clearly, from the point of view of the Rolling Stones. We'll take that. But before we do, marks out of 10 for Did You See the Sunrise? Parts 1 and 2, Jessica Burtis.
I'm gonna have to give it a 9. I give Maggie a 10. I think it's a very intense episode to kind of break into the series with. I always saw Magnum PI as kind of like a fun series. I don't know. So it's very interesting seeing this angle of it. But yeah, it's great, I think.
Okay, so a 10 from that point of view. Paul Powers, what about yourself?
Yeah, straight up 10, and especially Jean is also a 10.
Thank you. Robin, are you going to go any lower, or are you going to say, well, where are you going to go?
Dude, I've smacked down the money for a complete 8-season box set. It can't be anything but a 10, can it? I've thought of very little else but these 2 episodes since I watched them. They've made an impact. I loved it.
Fantastic. Jackie.
Just wait until we get on to St. Elsewhere, Robin. That's going to be a whole new world for you. But still, let's not go there. Yes, Jackie, indeed.
Yeah, of course, 10. It's an amazing 2 episodes, and it certainly sets the character of Maggie up perfectly, and yeah, it's very good.
Well, of course, in addition to Jean, we also had the return of Lance DeGault and 2 other fine souls who transferred to Airwolf.
Whoa, you're not going to get away with this, hombre. What's your score?
I'll go 9.5 because Maggie wasn't in both episodes. That's it, basically. So 9.5.
Good save there, Alex.
Yeah, that's exactly.
He is a slippery devil.
Oh man, is he slick?
Well, let's just work our way through that. And as I was saying,
when I come back to Great Britain, I'm going to come through Wales first, Robin.
Awesome. Yeah. Awesome. I'm going to hold you to that.
Okay.
So let's move on to Airwolf. and of course Sweet Britches season 2 episode 1, in which, as I said, great sympathy of course for the character of Mac, because he had a car incident, his car blew up, the Ferrari blew up in the Magnum episode. Curiously enough, the Ferrari is also totaled in the new series as well, in the same sort of episode. So clearly sunrise and Ferraris being blown up or having becoming complete wrecks is a parallel line. In this particular case, of course, the character he portrays gets done by lions. But Robin, would you like to actually explain the background to Sweet Britches, please?
Sweet Britches, opening the second season of Airwolf, starts with, I think, what I believe to be at the time to be one of the best motorcycle stunts seen in a TV series, because that was a fall. We have a renegade rider being chased down by the usual backwater hick sheriff. Also in the pursuit is a police helicopter manned by our gal, Caitlin O'Shaughnessy. It seems that the person who's being run down by the sheriff, was it now Bogan? Of Polk County, was an old associate of Stringfellow Hawks. Stringfellow Hawk being, of course, the pilot of Airwolf. And he's asked to investigate the guy's disappearance because, sadly, he didn't make it out alive. In the meantime, Caitlin has her own problems with Sheriff Bogan, who refers to her as a flying meter maid, much to her chagrin and us who would become her fans. So there's also a large nature reserve, which isn't really a reserve. It's where animals are trapped and are tracked down by the hideously rich people for their own amusement. And what Bogan does is he takes certain prisoners and allows certain very rich and silly people to track down human beings. And Hawk goes with his super helicopter and Dominic Santini to investigate this. I think I'd like to ask Jean a couple of questions on this, because there are so many things that these two have in common.
Let's just hold it momentarily, Robin, if we may, because I'd like to turn to Jessica. Jessica, another Airwolf episode for yourself. We obviously looked at one earlier in the Resonance Rewind series. What did you make of Sweet Britches, the introductory episode, of course, for Caitlin O'Shaughnessy?
I thought it was very interesting. It was very action-packed, and I think Robin summarized it very perfectly. It has lots of elements of the most dangerous game to it, but I thought that it was very, very just like different, unique in a way that I hadn't seen in another show. And Caitlin specifically is such a likable character, and I think that, you know, seeing another woman in a position of power in this place is so kind of groundbreaking, and so it's inspiring. Seeing when this was made. So I think it was a very good, you know, second episode for Airwolf to kind of jump into the series. I really enjoyed it, and I'd want to watch more.
Just stick with the first 3 seasons, and particularly seasons 2 and season 3. Season 4, we won't go there. It's a different line. Robin, your questions, please.
Right. I was curious because there are so many. I've got 3 questions. 3. How long a gap was there between filming the 2 shows, being that they basically had the same supporting cast?
So they blew Mac up in Magnum because Jeff McKay was going on to Tales of the Gold Monkey, which was another Don Belisario show. And so then they brought me in. Well, then I was still doing Magnum when they did the first 9 episodes of Airwolf, and the powers that be, thank goodness, up in the Universal Tower, they decided that they wanted a woman on the show, a female character, a strong female character, to bring in a larger female audience and to bring in the younger boys audience. So my primary target were like 14-year-old boys. And so Don wrote me from that show into Sweet Britches. I think it was an homage both to Jeff and I that Don mirrored the two casts because it was James Whitmore Jr., Jeff McKay, and I in both shows. And we were Don was famous for his stable of actors that he brought back time and again. Buck Green, Lance
Legault.
Lance Legault was in both series episodes as well. So did I answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
My question number 2 actually is about Lance Legault. In the late 70s, early 80s, if you wanted a villain for a TV show, he would show up. I mean, he was on Buck Rogers. He was, of course, in constant pursuit of the A-Team. He did several appearances on Airwolf, including the opening narration on season 1, and of course, Magnum and several others. My question was, what was he like to work with backstage? I mean, because he was so evil, such the guy that you loved to hate on all these great shows. What was he like in real life? And my other part was, why on earth did he reference your butt twice? Once in each episode.
Again, I think that goes back to my first meeting with Dawn. My walking out the door and some part of my anatomy that he found.
So you didn't walk out backwards then, Jean? That's that's another revelation.
I turned on my heel and got out of there. Yeah, so yes, a cute little butt, sweet britches. Yeah, no, there was something going on with that. And hey,
let it go, Jean. Let it go. Different era, different time.
It's boy, I'm sorry I started this now.
When you need a cute butt or a good actress, call Jean Bruce Scott. There you go.
And let's not talk about targeting 14-year-old boys. Not this time of the evening. Anyway, moving on to Robin. Your final question, please. We need to move on now.
Oh, Lance Legault. Let me go back to Lance Legault. Lance was a Southern gentleman and was so charming and funny and solicitous, and I could not have asked for a better boss or a bad guy to play opposite in either of those two series. I loved going to work with Lance. He was just fantastic. So, and he was the workingest actor in Hollywood at the time. I mean, he went from show to show to show to show, and when he wasn't doing that, he was doing voiceover. This guy was amazing. He was just simply amazing.
Robin, final question. Time is tight. Off you go.
That was it.
That's it. Sorted.
That was
Marvelous. Okay,
yeah.
Let's briefly move around to the team then. Jessica, would you like to give us a score for Sweet Britches, please?
9. I really liked Caitlin. I was surprised with how fast I liked her character, so 9.
Yeah. I'll also go 9, maybe 9.5, but again, still need more Caitlin O'Shaughnessy in from that point of view. Jackie, what about yourself?
Yeah, probably a 9. Obviously it's a great episode because we get to meet Kate for the first time, but it's not my favourite.
Indeed so. Paul, has this tempted you to actually go and seek out the episode? Because I know you invested in the Hawaiian shirt for Magnum PI, so Airwolf is another treat you have in store. Will you be seeking that out and sharing it with your students at Anglia Ruskin?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I searched really, really hard for that particular episode. I just couldn't get hold of it in time for this meeting. But as a kid growing up in the 80s, Airwolf was, it was everything to me, with
he is the 14-year-old boy you were targeting, Gene.
Yeah.
Bottom line. So let's not go.
I finally met one.
Exactly. Yeah, this is a dream come true, Gene.
and Robin, your score?
Well, sadly, I was 24, but hey, what? Well, it's not because Jean is here, but I'm giving this a 10 because it's in my top 5 Airwolf episodes of all time. So this is a 10.
I give it a 10 because I actually got to fly one of the helicopters on this episode.
Let's face it, Don Balisarius, he likes you to do your own stunts as well. So let's progress on that. That's another tale entirely. Jackie, share with us, how can people actually get in touch with obviously your fantastic websites, the hosting of Jean Bruce Scott's fantastic career and more?
Yeah, it's on Facebook. It's a Facebook page, Jean Bruce Scott Archive. Just search for it. It comes up really well in the search engines now, which is just fantastic. And yeah, Jean's on there all the time, and we interact with everybody, and we try to make it fun. And yeah, it's
I was
great
very
fun.
flattered, Jackie, that I was made a VIP Jean Bruce Scott supporter. I thought that was very
Well, of
exciting.
course.
It's truly wonderful. And I know we'd originally talked about sharing some thoughts about conventions with yourself, Jean. That's going to have to wait for another time, but in the very near future. Bottom line is, Jessica, would you like to throw those last two questions around the team, please? Off you go, Jessica.
I would love to. So Paul, Jackie, Jean, and Robin, have you all had a reasonably interesting Zoom call with us today?
Yes.
The best.
Yes.
Absolutely, yeah.
And will you all be joining us again?
I'd love
Yes,
to.
I hope so.
Yep.
Marvelous, polite, effective, well sorted through. We didn't even discuss, is it Vietnam? Is it Vietnam? Is there a Nam, a Nam? You know, we don't know where we're going with respect to that. But still, the campaign certainly to get Maggie Poole reinstated as personified by Jean Bruce Scott in Magnum PI definitely starts today, basically. I mean, they're into the third season now, so it's pretty much time that they actually work through the whole thing. It's time you actually made a return to the Hawaiian shores, Jean. That's a bottom line there. That's it, a wrap for now. Happy resonating and indeed midweek driving. We will see you all again very soon.
Bye.
Thanks, Alex.
Bye.
Thank you, Jackie.
Bye.
Thank you, Paul, Jessica.
Bye.